Hi, my name's Corey Rogie, and I'm here with GI Sportz, and we're going to go over the Empire Axe 2.0 today. I'm just going to do a quick unboxing just to show you what you get in the box when you purchase the marker. Looks like we have a quick start guide for the Axe 2.0. We have the marker itself. Go ahead and pull our barrel out here. We have a 688 bore, our tip. Go ahead and thread those together. You also get a barrel blocking device, a small parts kit. Looks like you get an extra poppet seal in there, a little bit of lube, extra ball detents, O-rings, screws, a couple Allen wrenches to service your gun. So here's the Axe 2.0. Really nice gun, loaded with a bunch of different features. It has brake beam eyes, has removable eye covers, which is nice for servicing your eyes. It has a quick release bolt system. Push this button right here in the back and then just go ahead and give your bolt system a pull and everything comes right out. You don't have anything left behind. It's really nice, really easy to take this apart and maintain it, lube it, get it ready for your next big game or tournament. It's a great bolt system. This regulator system is pretty much identical to a lot of the other regs that we have on our Vanquish, our Axe Pro, and a lot of the minis. But we're going to go through and we're going to show you how that operates as well. You have different firing modes with the electronics here, very easy use shockwave board. We're just going to go through and take the gun apart and show you how everything works, show you some troubleshooting and so on and so forth. So since I already have the bolt out, we're just going to touch base on this bolt here. You have your bolt spring, okay, which the bolt spring, believe it or not, it is directional. How do you figure that out? Well, it's pretty simple. You're going to take your bolt and your bolt spring and you're going to slide the spring onto the bolt. So I just put it on backwards. You can tell it's backwards because it doesn't snap into place, okay? You don't want to put that into your gun that way because you run the risk of maybe possibly damaging your bolt or damaging the receiver of the gun. So you always want to make sure that your spring actually snaps or clicks. You heard that faint click there. It'll click into place, okay? And we'll go ahead, we'll remove our spring again, our bolt, and then we have our bolt guide assembly. Inside the bolt guide assembly here, I'm going to use a 3/32 wrench to remove our bolt, our velocity adjuster, I should say. So you have your velocity adjusting cap, and then you have your poppet, and there's a spring inside there. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can remove it, okay? One, I would never use anything metal to shove down the front face of this, okay, to remove the poppet. I've seen people do that. It's not good. You run the risk of damaging the bolt guide, damaging the poppet, and you know, I mean, yeah, it's not the end of the world. They're pretty easy to replace, but it's going to cost you. So don't use anything metal to shove down the front of there. I mean, if you have like a plastic dowel rod or something like that, you could probably get away with that. But even then, I usually don't do that. I have this soft mat here. So typically what I'll do is I'll just invert it and then just give it kind of a tap. And it's not going to hurt anything. This is a neoprene mat. You know, it sounds vicious, but it's really not bad at all. You just give it a few taps, and then your poppet is going to slide right out of the back end, okay? Make sure you're doing this on a padded surface, okay? You know, I mean, if you smack that on something like this wood tabletop or concrete, obviously you could damage it, but it's neoprene, so it's good to go. You're not going to hurt anything, all right? This is pretty important. Right here, you have your seal that's on the front face of the poppet here, and that's what seals on the inside of the bolt guide. And obviously, if this is damaged, you're going to get a leak down the bolt guide, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. If you ever do run across a leak, it's coming down the barrel, coming out of the front face of the bolt guide or the front face of the bolt, check the condition of this poppet face, okay? If it needs to be replaced. We do include one in the parts kit, so it's easy to replace. Same thing with this O-ring here. You know, if you put a lot of shots on the gun, O-rings do eventually wear out, and it's a good idea to replace that. All right. When you're lubricating, we recommend that, especially on a brand new factory built gun like this, I just pull it out of the box. You know, you buy one from your local shop. You don't know how long it sat on their shelf for. You know, it could have been a week, could have been a month. Regardless, I like to go through the gun and just wipe down the components of the bolt, and I like to re-lubricate it using like a Dow 33 equivalent, okay? Paintball gun grease, Dow 33. This is actually Tippmann certified marker grease. Since we're here at the Tippmann facility, I have easy access to this. Works great. It's essentially Dow 33 in this package. Like I said, I will go through and grab my shop rag here, and I'm gonna just go through and wipe down the individual pieces. Okay, bolt. And sometimes your bolt spring will have some grease on it, or if you've been playing for a while, it gets dirty. You might get some paint on there, dirt, sand, debris, whatever. Just go through and just kind of wipe down that spring. The bolt guide, same thing. Go through, wipe it down really good. All right. Bolt guide O-rings, they're probably one of the most commonly replaced items there. And I'll kind of show you what we look for whenever we go to replace bolt guide O-rings. You know, this gun, you put a lot of shots on it. I mean, it's a really fast gun, and you can shoot a lot of paint with it. And these O-rings will actually wear over time. So what we do is we just kind of do a test where we lube it up, and then we'll put the bolt on the front of the bolt guide and just kind of give it a shake like that. And if you give it a shake and that bolt guide comes screaming off there, you know, it's just falling right off, then that's going to tell you right away that those bolt guide O-rings, they're going to need to be replaced. And it's a good idea to, at that time, replace them. You know, you run into various issues, you know, when those bolt guide O-rings need to be replaced, low velocity. Sometimes the gun cycle's kind of funny, stuff like that. So it's a good idea to, one, make sure they're well lubricated, and two, make sure they're nice and snug on the bolt. That bolt is going to have some friction to it. So now that we have all our parts wiped off here, I'm going to start with a poppet. All right. We're going to go ahead and remove our cap and apply a little bit of grease to this. You don't need to go overboard. Just a small, thin coat on the poppet O-ring. Okay. And just work that grease around that O-ring. Make sure there's like a nice little grease line on both sides of the O-ring. That's how you can tell that you have it greased up really nice. And then you're just going to have a thin coat of grease on the top side of the O-ring. And then once you have that, you're going to go ahead and make sure that this poppet face goes in first. Okay. So you're going to slide that in through the back side of the bolt guide, like so. I just use my finger to push it down into place, and you'll see it'll shove forward, okay? You want to be careful when putting that in there because there are a set of holes on the outside that go all the way through, and if you're not careful with shoving that poppet into place, you could run the risk of nicking one of those O-rings, and once again, you'll run into weird symptoms. The gun doesn't sound like it's actually shooting correctly. And I have seen those O-rings, or the one single O-ring, I should say, on the poppet. It gets a little nick in it, and it's damaged, and it doesn't function. So from there, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our velocity cap. Okay. If you ever get a leak out of the back side of the bolt guide, there is one O-ring that's on the velocity adjustment cap. If that O-ring is just worn out from turning it in, turning it out, or you get dirt debris in there, you're turning it in, turning it out, that O-ring can get damaged. And if you ever get a leak coming out of the back of the cap, 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what it is that O-ring on the velocity cap. So we'll go ahead, we'll turn this all the way in, and we're gonna set it back to what we normally set it here at the factory. And we turn it all the way in until it comes to a stop. You don't need to wrench it down tight. It'll come to a stop, and then back it off one complete turn, and that's a good starting point. Okay, now you may need to adjust your velocity afterwards, but that's where we normally like to start. Going back to the bolt guide, we're going to go ahead and apply some lube to the front side of the bolt guide here where the O-rings are located. And we're going to go ahead and kind of smooth that around on the O-rings. You want to make sure that you get a little bit of grease on both sides of the O-rings. You're going to see like a line of grease on either side of the O-ring, and then you're gonna typically have a thin coat on top, all right? And that's perfect. If it looks like it's too much grease, take a little bit off. It's not, you know, it's not the end of the world. You don't wanna over-grease your gun though, because a lot of that grease is gonna migrate down the barrel, and then you're gonna have shots that veer off to the left, right? It's almost gonna simulate having broken paint in the barrel, all right? From there, we're gonna go ahead and put our bolt back onto the bolt guide, all right? Apply a little bit more grease and just kind of work that around. And then another thing that we check is the O-rings, all right? So if your O-rings are worn out on your bolt guide and you're holding it by the bolt and you give it a little shake like that, the bolt guide just slides clear off, then that's going to indicate to you that you need to replace those O-rings that are on the bolt guide, all right? So, and that bolt will fit pretty tight going back on there. That's not uncommon. I've had a couple customers call and ask why that fits so snug. Well, those O-rings have to seal, so that's why it fits so snug. As far as the spring goes, going back to what I was saying previously, the spring is directional. Okay, when you apply that spring on there, you're gonna put it under pressure and you'll hear a faint little click, all right? And that's gonna indicate that you have it on there properly. If you were to put it on the other way, flip it around, put it on the other way, and it just goes on there and it doesn't click, you know you're putting the spring on wrong, okay? Now, as far as these larger O-rings on the bolt guide, you can lubricate them. It's, in my opinion, it's not really necessary. They're static O-rings, they don't move, they don't have any parts moving across them, they're just creating a seal on the inner diameter of the body of the gun. One thing I do like to apply grease to is that front O-ring. Why? Well, it just makes it a little bit easier to slide the whole assembly back into the body of the gun. So I'll go ahead and get a little bit of grease here and work that around that bolt guide O-ring. One thing I will point out, and I've seen this on a couple guns before, it's pretty rare, but I've seen it. This middle O-ring here, okay, this is kind of the divider between the air on this side and the air on the back side of the poppet, okay? So if this O-ring is damaged, it's not getting a good seal, you'll fire the gun and it'll sound weird, like it's kind of sputtering, but not really firing a full velocity shot, okay? There's a good chance that that middle O-ring needs to be replaced. That way you can divide the air up in the valve assembly, okay? And you're not getting equal pressure on both sides, okay? When that O-ring fails, you get about the same amount of pressure on both sides, and then when the solenoid activates, it doesn't really want to shove that poppet out of the way because it's the same pressure on both sides, all right? So keep that in mind. I fixed a few guns with that little technique there just by replacing that middle O-ring. Pretty rare, but it is something that I wanted to throw in there for you guys, just to kind of keep a lookout for, all right? And those O-rings do come in your O-ring kit that comes with the gun, all right? Now that we have our bolt all lubed up, cleaned up, ready to go, we're gonna go ahead and reinsert that into the body. So we're gonna go ahead and slide that in there. You have this pin on the bottom. You wanna just make sure it lines up with that groove. And you're gonna go past your little bolt catch here. Okay, spring-loaded catch for the bolt. Go ahead and give it a pull. Make sure it doesn't pop loose on you. And then once again, to reset your velocity to the factory spec, you're just gonna go ahead, turn that all the way in, and then you're gonna back it off one complete rotation, like so, and it will be recessed into the bolt guide a little bit. That's just a good starting point, okay? It doesn't give you any predetermined velocity. I mean, that's gonna depend on how the paint fits in the barrel, so on and so forth. So you're gonna have to chrono it after this kind of maintenance. Just to make sure that you're within a safe velocity range. So now we're gonna move on to the eye maintenance. It's pretty simple to do. And one thing that's nice about the Axe 2.0 is they make these eye covers, they're removable. It's great. You don't have to take the entire gun apart like you used to in the past for the standard Axe to kind of clean your eyes. I believe the wrench that we're using here is it's a 564. Allen wrench, And that's what we're going to use to remove our eye cover. Go ahead and remove our Allen wrench here. What's really neat about the design of this eye cover right here is you have your screw, and then you have this C-clip that's on the back side that holds your screw in place. So you're not gonna lose that. Okay, it's pretty neat little design. We'll go ahead and set our eye cover off to the side here, and then from here we're gonna go ahead and show you the eye and also the detent, the ball detent. All right, grab another little tool here. We're gonna pop that detent right out of there. So you can kind of see this rubberized detent. It's got that little post that sticks up from the base there, and that's what's gonna keep the paintballs from just rolling right out of the end of your barrel. You wanna make sure they're in good shape. Obviously, just do a visual inspection. It's not torn, the rubber's not ripped. It still has some good elasticity to it. It's in great shape, and it should be. I mean, it's a new gun, right? As you're going through your eyes, you want to go through there with a Q-tip, and it's a good idea to just periodically check your eyes, even if you don't break paint, because sometimes you can get grease, you know, from relubricating your gun. It'll work its way in there, believe it or not. You know, you're firing the gun, sometimes that grease will migrate down the barrel, down the breech, in and around your eyes, in and around, you know, the ball detents. And it's good to periodically just remove that, take it apart, clean it. Q-tips or like, you know, the CO2 cans that you use to, you know, dust off your computer keyboard work really great right in here. Another thing that we like to do is pop that eye right out of the socket there and then hit that with a Q-tip. All right, or if you have like a small microfiber cloth, you can just wipe down the eye. It's pretty rigid. You're really not going to damage it by manipulating it, pulling it out to the side. Now, obviously, you don't want to rip that out of there, but if you just pull it off to the side like I did, you're not going to hurt anything, okay? It's pretty rigid, okay? Once you get done cleaning it all up, it's time to put it all back together. Before you put it all back together, look down inside the hole where your eye would actually look through, okay? Make sure there's no debris in there. It's very common to every once in a while see just like a little chunk of paint shell, and that paint shell will block the eyes, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and drop it back into place. And then from there, we're gonna put our ball detent back into place. Obviously that post is gonna go in through that hole there, and you're gonna have the flat side of the ball detent facing toward you and the eye cover, all right? From there, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our eye cover. So you wanna be very careful here. Don't force anything. These eye covers, they fit tight. They do fit tight. I like that. I think that's a nice feature to have. It's a nice fit and finish. But you want to be careful that when you start threading, if you feel any resistance, you know, go ahead and back it off a little bit and try again. I have seen customers, you know, they're not careful and they end up stripping out the body of the gun because they just rushed it. You know, they went and torqued it down, didn't get it threaded in properly, or they got it cross-threaded. It shouldn't take a lot of pressure to get that nice and snug. That's pretty much the basic eye maintenance there. Like I said, on occasion, check that ball detent, and just be careful when you're tightening that screw back up. From there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna move on to the ASA regulator on the bottom here. Cool feature about this is that you have the on-off lever. So that's the off position, on position. It's, you know, a good idea to go through and service your regulator, especially if you run into issues where you get shoot down, okay? So you fire a shot, get a good couple, you know, really high velocity shots, and then you get one that just kind of putters out. More than likely, that's something wrong with your regulator, okay? And you're gonna wanna take that apart, clean it up really well, relubricate it, check the reg seat, put it all back together, and 9 times out of 10, your gun's gonna go back to working just fine, all right? So I'm gonna start off by using my 1/2-inch deep well socket here, all right? And it's a thin wall, okay? That's pretty critical. Some of your 1/2-inch sockets, they got like a thicker wall to them, and you can't get it down in the back side of the regulator, all right? So this is the tool that you want. Go ahead, get down in there, and we're gonna break that brass nut loose. One thing that I'll mention about this whole system is that this brass nut, if it's over tightened, it'll cause you some issues with your lever, okay, your on-off lever. What can happen is if that's super tight, if this is super tight, you'll go to flip your lever into the off position and you won't get any venting, okay? And that's because that wedge pin inside there is getting bound up by that brass core inside there, all right? So we'll go ahead, we'll remove our pivot pin. Just go ahead and unthread that. Set that off to the side here, and I'll kind of move some of my tools out of the way so you can see the parts. Go ahead, pull our lever off to the side here, set that down. Now if I invert the gun, I'm gonna get that pin wedge and also the spring to come out. And just a little tech tip, and I do this even on new guns that have been shot for a while, I always go through and apply a little grease to the end of that spring and then shove that spring back down in there, okay? What that does is that prevents your spring. It creates a little, like a sticking action. You know, you get the grease in there, the spring, it'll stick. So that spring just doesn't go flying across the room. From there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull out that brass core, all right? I use a tool. You could use like an Allen wrench or something like that. That's where that wedge sits, so you're really not gonna damage anything. Just stick it down in there and then push it back towards the back of the regulator. And then if it doesn't fall out, you can just go ahead and give it a tap and it should come out. So if you get any kind of weird leak that's coming from the lever itself, okay, you might want to check this O-ring on the back side here. If this O-ring is damaged, that will cause a leak from the lever area, all right? And it's a good idea to check these O-rings too, especially where your pin seats and stuff like that. If it's damaged, looks worn out, the pin just falls straight out, might be a good idea to change those, okay? So we'll go ahead, we'll set that off to the side there. And we're left with a couple more parts inside the reg. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take the cap off first, okay? I'm gonna remove our regulator cap. And inside that regulator cap, you have a spring. You got your spring. You have this washer that has indentation on it, okay? It is directional. And I'll show you how to put that back together once we reassemble our reg. And then you have your cap, okay? So the cap has a set screw in the front of it. That's what you, that's what you use to adjust your pressures going into the gun. Going back to the reg cap, I unthread the reg cap a little bit. There's that set screw, I take that out. And I don't take it all the way out, but I pull it out a few threads. That way when I go to reassemble and I put my reg cap back into place, I'm not tightening it down and getting some crazy pressure as soon as I air up my gun, all right? I want it to start off at the lower end of the pressure, and then I want to work my way up with the adjustments. From there, what I'm gonna do is take my free hand here, I'm gonna kind of push down on this reg piston, and then with my 3mm hex driver here, I'm gonna go in through the back side of the regulator, all right? And I'm gonna loosen up that reg pin. Once you loosen up that reg pin, you're gonna have the reg pin, and sometimes you'll get the reg seat to come out with the pin, and sometimes the reg seat will still be in the regulator body, okay? This one just happened to come out with the pin. So the reg seat, you have this concave shape to it, and then you have your regulator pin. Your regulator pin is gonna match up with the concave, okay? If you have it flipped around backwards, it's not gonna work properly, okay? You're gonna have oddball pressures, you know, could spike, not get good pressure, so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that you have that reg seat. All right, you're going to make sure you have that reg seat facing the correct way. From there, we're going to go ahead and pull out the regulator piston on the front side here, and then you're going to have a regulator spring. And that's all the components to the reg that you need to service. Okay, all the other components, you know, you have a pressure relief valve in case, you know, you get too much pressure going to the reg, and then you have the filter. Filter, yeah, you could take that apart and clean it. And I can show you how to do that, but it's really, we don't do it that often, but just, you know, just to show you how to do it, it's pretty simple. You just have your cap here, remove your cap, then you have this little filter. Normally this isn't really dirty. I mean, as long as you have a field that has good air, they're pumping nice clean air into your high pressure air system and you maintain everything, you really don't have to worry about that. I don't even think I've ever taken my own personal filter apart on my gun. So with that being said, just go ahead and drop that filter back in there, your cap, just go ahead and put that back down and just tighten it back up. All the regulators do have this filter feature on there, which is pretty nice. But like I said, I mean, as long as you're getting good air going into the gun, you don't have to worry about that. So where do we go from here? We start off with the reg piston. This has the factory lube on there, not very much, but we're gonna go ahead, we're re-lubing it, we're gonna redo this reg, so we wanna go through and wipe off any old factory grease, and we're gonna apply new. I'm gonna go ahead and work that grease down into the O-ring grooves, all right? Like I said, you should see a little bit of grease on both sides of the groove, and then you're gonna have a thin layer on top. That's ideally what you want. You don't wanna have it caked on there. Just a nice thin coat. We're gonna go ahead and reinsert our regulator spring, our regulator piston. Once you have that inserted, go ahead and push down on it a little bit. And then from there, we're gonna push down on the regulator piston just to kind of apply a little bit of pressure. And then with our free hand, we're gonna grab our nut driver, and we're gonna grab the reg pin and the reg seat, and then we're gonna go ahead and reinsert that and tighten it down, okay? And when you're tightening down your reg pin and the reg seat, you don't wanna crank down on it too hard, all right? Just snug. It's about as hard as you gotta turn it. That's it. I mean, it stopped. You don't have to crank down on it. All right. From there, I'm going to go ahead and put the spring on the top of the reg piston, and then we're going to put that washer. The washer has that little indentation. Should be facing downward. All right. And then our cap, which like I said before, I unthread that screw slightly. All right. That way, when we attach air to it after rebuilding the reg, we don't get this crazy pressure spike. We just want to start off at a low pressure and work our way back up. Okay, so we have this brass core here. And I like to put a little bit of grease on this back O-ring. All right. Go ahead and wipe off any excess. Kind of got a lot on there. And then pretty critical part here is you have that oval opening on the reg housing, and then you also have that oval opening that's on the brass core there. You want to go ahead and just drop that in there and make sure they're kind of lined up with each other. If they're slightly off, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. You can actually get it to rotate a little bit. Just push it down in there. Okay, so now that we have everything lined back up, let me see if, actually I didn't even get it to click in there. Okay, so that will actually snap down inside there. Okay, that O-ring sometimes fits a little tight. It's not the end of the world. You can just kind of pull it back into its designated spot there. And then I like to go in there and make sure that that pin that interacts with your tank, you want to make sure that that's kind of pushed back towards the rear. That way you can fit your wedge and your spring in there, okay? So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna drop that down into the slot, okay, that oval slot in there, okay? From there, we're gonna put our lever on. We're gonna push down on that spring and the wedge pin, and we're gonna tighten up that pivot pin, all right? You don't need to crank down on this, you know, super hard. Just make sure it's snug, and check your lever. Make sure it's springing back and forth, which it is, all right? From there, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our brass nut into the backside of the regulator. So we're gonna go ahead and drop it down inside there. Once we have it down inside there, we're gonna use that 1/2-inch deep well, thin wall socket to tighten it up, all right? Now you don't wanna go overboard on tightening this, okay? What can happen if you over tighten this, you'll actually get your, lever to stick. I wanna make sure I'm not cross-threading that, okay? If you feel it not wanting to go in there, don't force it, okay? I mean, if something doesn't want to go, don't make it go, you know, because you'll end up typically causing more damage. So if it doesn't feel right, take it back out, start over again, okay? That just didn't, it felt like I was adding too much force. So stop and start over again, okay? And you can see that I didn't go overly tight there. Came to a stop. I didn't crank it down anymore. If you feel like you went too far, you can go ahead and back it off just a little bit, but that feels about perfect. And then when you flip your lever, and maybe I did get it a little too tight because that pin did stick there for a second. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back it off just a little bit, okay? Just a hair, okay? I'll go ahead and try that now. All right, that feels good. Now, once you have it all reassembled, you can go ahead and air up the gun, okay? Go ahead and add your tank to the gun, air it up, throw that lever, and with this screw being that far out, you could potentially hear a leak right down the barrel, right? And that's because this reg is set now at such a low pressure because we backed that screw off. Not a big deal, it's not the end of the world. All you have to do is take your 3/32 Allen wrench and start to adjust it inward, and that leak should go away, especially once you get close to being flush with the cap. Now, I like to let it protrude from the cap a little bit, and then what I'll do is I'll go to the chronograph, and then I'll go test the velocity. So go to the chronograph, throw a couple shots over the chronograph, check to make sure that your velocity is good. If your velocity is a little low, then go ahead and turn it in a little bit more. You shouldn't have to go much further past, you know, flush with the cap, all right? Once you get flush with the cap and you still have low velocity, just remember that you still have plenty of adjustment on the back side of your bolt guide, okay? So that velocity adjuster on the back side of the bolt guide, you can use that to bring your velocity up as well. There's no need to keep cranking on your reg. Just leave it flush with the cap and then back off your velocity adjuster here, okay? And that is, so here we're gonna show you how to turn on the marker. The Axe 2.0, it utilizes a shockwave board system. It's very, very easy to use. It's very easy to turn on, turn off, turn the eyes on, turn the eyes off. It's simple. So we'll go ahead and show you how to do that now. You're just gonna go ahead and push and hold your power button. You're gonna get a red, and then you're gonna get a green flashing. Green flashing indicates that obviously you have a good battery, everything's good to go, but there is no paint in the breech, okay? So I'll just kind of stick my finger down there just to kind of simulate what's going on. And there's no paint, right? There we go. Now you can see the flash, it kind of goes a little faster. Right? No paint, paint, no paint, paint, okay? If you want to turn the eyes off, it's also very simple. You're just going to push the power button. Oh, I just turned it off there. You don't want to do that. Just push the power button and let go. And you're going to get that faster flickering, okay? The faster flickering obviously indicates that your eyes are turned off. And you can fire the gun in the eyes off position. Okay, turn them back on. You just tap that power button again, and you're going to get that constant flash. All right. Pull the trigger. You're not going to hear that solenoid clicking because the eyes are on and there's no ball inside your breech there. Okay. To turn the marker off, really simple. Just push and hold down the power button. It'll turn red. Let go of the power button. It'll turn off. All right. And that's just the basic functionality of how to turn the gun on, how to turn it off, how to turn the eyes off, and then how to turn the eyes back on. All right. Really user-friendly. Really like that a lot. You can obviously do a lot as far as the programming goes with this particular gun. You know, if you want to change modes, rate of fire, so on and so forth, I would obviously refer you to your owner's manual, or you could also go to paintballsolutions.com, or you can give us a call at the 1-800 number and we can walk you through it.